That's perfect.
Okay,
It's
good.
all yours. Please go
All
ahead.
right.
Who are and why on earth you're talking to us.
So I'm just going to introduce kind of local nature recovery strategies. I am the coordinator for the Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin local nature recovery strategy. Um, and this first slide just shows who's on our steering group, and I'm going to try and make it a kind of fairly general um, conversation because I know that it's not Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin focused. But that's obviously my experience. There are similarities, obviously, across the country, and the fundamental point from this slide is that it is collaborative. It's important that it is a collaborative project. I work for Shropshire Council, but I don't feel necessarily that I work for the council. I feel like I work for the Nature Recovery Strategy Steering Group. That's they're kind of my guide, and they've been really, really helpful and really supportive. Obviously, with very different organisational priorities. We've got people like NFU and CLA who are more kind of there from a landowner voice perspective. And then the arm's length government bodies like Natural England, Forestry Commission and Environment Agency. And then kind of the Wildlife Trust and the National Landscape team along with the council. So it's a really broad kind of cross-sector partnership at the steering group level, but then it's much broader than that in terms of everybody that's been involved in developing it. So what are strategies? So the purpose of the local nature recovery strategy is to identify priority nature recovery actions across the whole county, and importantly also to map them. So we are one of 48. So whatever area you're in, you will have a local nature recovery strategy at some point in its development. A few have already been published, but only very few. I think there's kind of 6 in across England that have been published so far. A number are out for consultation at the moment, like ours is currently out for consultation. And I saw someone put a note in the chat that theirs is out at the moment. Some have are kind of past that and are kind of seeking to kind of get adopted. Importantly, it's got a legislative background to it. So it's the Environment Act 2021, and DEFRA is the kind of organisation that has produced all the guidance and is the one that we get the grant from. So each organisation that's developing it. So here it says the legislation, it designates a responsible authority. So that is normally the county council type organisation in the area. So Shropshire Council isn't a county council, but it's that sort of function. And then it also designates supporting authorities. So in this situation, DEFRA appointed Telford and Wrekin Council as a supporting authority, and Natural England in every county is the supporting authority, but it would generally be the district authorities and borough councils that would be a supporting authority. And they have to, they've got formal roles, so they have to be kind of generally involved throughout its development. But there's a formal process where they've got to say yes before it goes out to consultation. And then again, they've got to say yes before it is adopted. So why the need? Importantly, we've got to have it. The Environment Act says we've got to have it. So that's the fundamental driving force. Along with the requirement to produce the local nature recovery strategy, the Environment Act also set out that all public bodies, including town and parish councils, now have an enhanced duty to maintain and enhance biodiversity. And some of what Janet's going to talk about in a minute will pick up on that. But more broadly, we know we've got these trends. They're not looking good, kind of generally across the board, especially for specialist species. We know we've got fragmented habitats. That's having big impacts. We've got faltering ecosystem functions, flooding, drought, soil health, carbon capture. They're all big issues, and if we've got a more resilient habitat, more resilient nature, land, it has all those broader benefits, as well as benefiting nature. It also benefits all these other services that land needs to provide for us, as well as, kind of everything else that needs to survive in it. There are additional benefits. There's more and more evidence around health and well-being, importance of being out in nature, and what it can provide to us. We've evolved over millennia of being out in nature. We need it, as well as the fundamental air and water it provides. But then the kind of economic benefits here in Shropshire, I'm sure, as in many of the areas that you represent, there are some amazing kind of beautiful natural assets, and the sustainable tourism element from an economic point of view is also an important consideration. There is an upswell of interest and activity, kind of driven more recently, various different drivers, kind of talks of kind of green finance, kind of coming in, but also the agri-environment scheme changes are more from a kind of nature-led perspective, the kind of public money for public goods. And there's just a general upswell of interest and activity, people wanting to take action. So it's timely, as well as being kind of required and needed. It is also kind of responding to a kind of want in various sectors of society. A lot of the guidance, if you go on and have a look at it, don't know how interested you are to look at guidance, but it talks very much about bringing stakeholders together. That's one of its important elements in terms of its development, the local nature recovery strategy. And the purpose is to align action to the county priorities. So, we kind of started out with a whole huge number of priorities and reduced them down to try and help. We've got to focus action. That's the job of the strategy. We can't say everything's important when that might be what we think. We've got to think, okay, well, the life of the strategy is we're working on about 10 years. What can we achieve within that time? What should we be focusing on? Another purpose is to target funds. So it's about targeting funds and resources. The only direct link with funds at the moment to local nature recovery strategies is biodiversity net gain. And people get 15% uplift if they're doing biodiversity net gain in a mapped area of the local nature recovery strategy. But we also think that there's going to be future connections to wider agri-environment schemes, such as the kind of top end, which is landscape recovery, and other funding bids. It's an important consideration if a county has spent a long time considering what its priorities are and where they are and what they are, then people are going to use them. DEFRA is not paying for each county to produce this for no reason. We've got limited money, and it will therefore influence how funding is used in future. The tricky thing is that we don't completely know how yet, which is putting landowners in a tricky situation when they're trying to decide what the best thing for their business is in a really turbulent time for them. It will provide guidance for landowners and others interested in nature recovery. We're hoping it's useful, and that's one of the kind of main drivers behind our consultation that's out. We want people to say, is it useful? How can we make it more useful? How can we make it more accurate and appropriate? So what it is, it's two things. So it's the statement of biodiversity priorities, and that's the kind of what. So in each area, it sets out a description of the strategy area. It needs to set out what are the key opportunities, what are the key pressures and threats that need to be addressed, and then really importantly, what are the priorities and actions. They'll be different for each area, but there'll also be a lot of similarities. We know we need more wetland. We know we need to restore peatland. We need to connect up woodlands. it's all those sorts of things that we're talking about. It's nothing new from that perspective. It's the kind of more habitat, it's the bigger habitat, it's the kind of making it better and better connected. And what's different about this is prioritizing what it is that we focus on. And then the map is saying, well, where is it that we should be focusing on? And each map has started from the same point. So on our map, just there in that image, you'll see that there's green bits and brown bits. The green bits are the kind of bits that are really good already. So they're the designated sites, and every area has been told by DEFRA what they include within that what we've called what's green on that map. It's called the areas of particular importance for biodiversity. So it's the kind of existing good bits. And they're things like the sites for special scientific interest, or Ramsar sites, or local wildlife sites, or local nature reserves. So things that have actually got a designation, along with irreplaceable habitat. So things like peatland and ancient woodlands. And then each area has mapped what in this map is brown, so the areas that could become of particular importance for biodiversity. It's a big mouthful. But and this bit's different because we're mapping what could be there. We're not necessarily mapping what is there. And DEFRA didn't specify a methodology to do that. And so each area has adopted its own methodology. We've worked with Oxford University that had an established methodology that we kind of built on to make it a bit more Shropshire and Telford specific. But every area has done something slightly different, which is good in that it's locally driven. And it's really tricky because the end goal for Natural England, for DEFRA, is to have one whole map which sets out this is the nature recovery network for England. So what the LNRS is a strategy to prioritise and focus on specific actions where they have the most impact. And there are a number of mapped actions which appear on the map. And then there are a whole set of unmappable actions, and they only appear in the strategy document. And some people are saying, oh, well, my land is not in the priority area. It's kind of showing as a white area. And some people are finding that a bit disincentivizing, and maybe not acknowledging the good work that they've done before, which I can understand is disheartening in some ways, but that's our job. We can't map everywhere. Otherwise, we're not prioritizing anything. So we've had a job to do, and that's what we've done using a kind of, a robust methodology. But importantly, there are actions that anyone can take anywhere. There is potential anywhere. We haven't mapped in Shropshire, we haven't mapped things like hedgerows because they're beneficial wherever they happen. We haven't mapped things like enhancing nature on farmland. So kind of reducing pesticides or increasing, kind of field corners for woodland or arable margins, or, anything like that. Although they're, fundamental and really important priorities, and arguably if they were adopted wholesale across the county, could potentially have a, absolutely massive impact, because as soon as you've got, insects and everything's got something else to eat it. But they're not mapped. So it's important to recognise that there are these two elements, the map and the strategy. So it is producing guidance for anyone who's managing land, who wants to improve nature, and it is based on sound methodology. And each area will be different, and the methodology needs to be kind of shared and set out. We've put it as an appendix to our strategy. And it is mapping what could be there rather than what is there. It won't necessarily be right. There's not necessarily a right answer because we're not mapping what's there currently. And it is just looking at land through a lens for nature. It's not looking at it from a business perspective or any other constraints. And it's, it's an opportunity for landowners and residents to shape nature recovery, which is important. If you're in an area where your consultation is out now, do take the opportunity to have a look. So what it's not a designation. When you looked at the map, it's about 50% of the county that we've mapped. Each area is slightly different, what's been mapped, but that's, it's that sort of amount. It's a large area of the county. So it's not a designation, and it's not requiring anybody to take any action. And there's no mandate for delivery at the moment. We're hoping that there is, and it sounds like it's coming from, I think from the planning bill. It was kind of mentioned within that, and there are also links with the nature restoration levy that was mentioned in the planning bill as well to the LNRS. So we're expecting the LNRS to be used, but we're waiting for that kind of future legislation to come through to kind of back that up. It's not perfect. No strategy will be perfect. Every data set is flawed, unfortunately, but we've done what we can do to the best of our ability, and it's the best available to us right now. And each LNRS will be iterated. So this is its first iteration, and the idea is that it's reviewed. So it's determined by the Secretary of State, but the window is between 3 and 10 years. It will be reviewed, and the recommendation from the Office for Environmental Protection is that review period is earlier rather than later, because this is new. And as soon as you start using something, you think, oh, that's what we should have put in it, or it's the same as anything. An early review would be helpful at this point. It's not a funded action plan, and it's not a grant provider, but it is meant to be used to help focus funding in the future. And it's informed by wider environmental pressure. So, we've got actions in there looking at reducing flooding, at managing low flows, linked to soil health and well-being, but it's not a plan for any of those. It's very much looking at how the land might support those broader outcomes. But like if you were to take a flood resilience plan, you would have some hard infrastructure in there, like walls and things, and it's not that. It's just drawn on the environmental pressures. Okay, that's me done, Janet. I'll hand over to you, but I'll keep sharing.
If you keep managing the slides,
Yeah,
Lynn, that would be
you
good.
just tell me when you want me to move.
Okay. So, as Lynn said, she's the lead for the local nature recovery strategy in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. And the reason I got interested was twofold, really. I'm a parish clerk, but only for a parish meeting. But I'm also on the board of Middlemarch's Community Land Trust, so I was already interested in nature recovery. And Lynn and I had a conversation quite early on where we talked about the engagement of town and parish councils in the local nature recovery strategy. So Lynn quite rightly has been focusing on farmers and landowners. We're a very rural county, and previous to developing the local nature recovery strategy, I was already working with some town and parish councils on a project called Restoring Shropshire's Verges project. So I'd already spent 18 months talking to town and parish councils about restoring roadside verges into long linear meadows. So when the local nature recovery strategy work came along, we, as part of my work with Middlemarch's Community Land Trust, started to run some conferences which were targeting town and parish councillors specifically. So we've run 3 conferences so far. We ran 2 in 2023, and our first big conference for Shropshire Association of Local Councils and the Local Nature Recovery Strategy last December, and we're about to run the 4th conference, which is on the 3rd of October this year. So next slide, please, Lynn. So this is the programme for our conference on the 3rd of October, and we've structured it so that we've got sort of, you know, local important people to talk and some national speakers. So one of the national speakers is Dr. Jack Reed from the University of Exeter. I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And Tom Chance, who's the Chief Executive of the National Community Land Trust Network. And encourage everybody to look at both the links for those people after we've talked through this slide. And then in the afternoon, we've been working with town and parish councils to try and get town and parish councils to develop bespoke nature recovery plans. So we've been working with town and parish councils for about a year now, and now they're starting to develop clusters where they're working together to form sort of green corridors between town and parish councils. We've got this fantastic network in Shropshire of town and parish councils of 184, and they're, because we're a very rural county, they're, you know, quite good at working with each other, and that's starting to come together now. And this programme is something that could be repeated everywhere. If people are interested in talking to us after this, I'm quite happy to help people put stuff together or think about how to put stuff together. So next slide, Lynn. So we've also been working with Exeter University. So Exeter University have been running this project called Nature Recovery and Regional Development, and the links there for people who are interested. And it talks about the 30 by 30 agreement. I don't know whether people know about the 30 by 30 agreement, but we've signed an international agreement to restore 30% of our land back to nature by 2030. Well, we're at 2025 now, so we'd better get a move on, I think. And there are currently 11 members of the Alliance, one of which is Shropshire. So we've been sending case studies to Jack and Exeter University about the work that's been happening in Shropshire, and hopefully these case studies are going to end up with DEFRA at some point. And they're nothing sort of sophisticated, they're just simple case studies mapping out the sorts of things that have been happening in town and parish councils here. So things like wildlife talks, putting up bird boxes, putting ponds in, planting hedgerows, restoring roadside verges, all the things that ordinary people can do and get involved in. So next, the other interesting thing, out of those 11 members in the Exeter University project, only ourselves and the Isle of Wight are targeting town and parish councils to implement nature recovery strategies. So we're, as far as I know, we're the only two counties working in this way, and I'm very happy to share what we've done here. So next slide, Lynn. So as a result of looking at the local nature recovery strategy and having talked to town and parish councils across Shropshire, what Lynn and I decided to do was develop this sort of a very simple workbook for people to work through. So all we've done is pull out the actions from the local nature recovery strategy that ordinary people can take. So there are things that, like what I mentioned before about restoring verges, putting bird boxes up, putting a pond in, and extra things like develop a local tree nursery. So we worked out if every town and parish council, for example, grew 200 trees, we could grow 38,000 trees across the county with local provenance. And last year we planted so many hedgerows, we ran out of trees to plant, or ran out of whips to plant. So little actions can all add up to sort of big actions. Yeah, and we're lucky in Shropshire that we've got these organisations on the ground that we can work with. So we've got a Marches Meadow group who are developing wildflower meadows. We've got Middle Marches Community Land Trust buying up land for nature and creating stepping stones for nature. And I'm sure everybody else will have organisations on the ground that they can tap into for support. So I think that's all I want to say, really. I'm quite happy to answer questions.
Lynn and Janet, thank you so much. I thought A, that was fascinating, B, it was very uplifting and reassuring, and C, I'm afraid I've written down on my piece of paper, who knew? It's just, I'm even more fascinated to discover that the Isle of Wight is so targeting parish councils, because I'm on a parish council in the Isle of Wight. I've never heard anything of this, so
Oh, really?
looking forward to finding out more and why we haven't been targeted yet. I do
That
have a couple of questions, if I could get the ball rolling, please. Which was way back at the start, Lynn. How does one actually find one's local nature recovery strategy organization? You say that there's 50 across the country. Who are they?
So there's a list. If I'll go away and find it and post it in the chat. But DEFRA basically said this is who they are, and there is a list online. It's a responsible authority list. So I'll find it.
Okay. Oh, someone's already put it in. Jackie.
Oh,
Thank
there
you
we
very
go.
much. Yes, well
Brilliant.
done. The second question I had was you mentioned mapping as being important to you, and I wondered, has anyone made you familiar with the fact that parish councils are now able to map everything that you're doing on their mapping systems because they're all compatible? And has anyone approached you and said, would you please export what you're doing to Parish Online so that local parishes can actually have your maps and work with them?
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Well, there we go.
And that would be really good. Yeah. So
Wouldn't it? It would be
anybody
stunning.
that asked for our map could have the files. They're kind of open source data. We bought a couple of data sets,
Yeah.
but they were kind of used in the magic behind it. The kind of outputs don't
Well,
need.
I'm very happy to work with you to help out there, but
Hmm,
there is a
that's
lot
really
that we could.
interesting.
It's also possible to make it two-way. So if
Yeah.
you want to update your map with what's happening in a local parish, that can be done electronically. So it's a two-way system.
So
Uh,
is that something that every parish council uses or could
at the
use?
moment, somewhere in the region of 2,500 councils are using it across the country. So there's
Oh,
still 7.5 to go, but we're hopeful.
that's
And
interesting.
the third question I had was really for everybody, but it was triggered by A, your discussions about funding, and B, a meeting that I attended last night. I'm in the middle of doing some crowdfunding, and crowdfunder.co.uk said we started 14 years ago as purely crowdfunding, but since then a bigger part of our business has been distributing cash that corporations, local authorities, and central government make available because they find it's an easy way of getting hold of people. So, for those of you who are looking for money, if you log in and sign in to crowdfunder.co.uk, which is a free service, then they will, and you describe what it is that you're trying to do, then their system automatically will channel you to those sources of funds in your area. So, corporations might be interested in a specific place, like, say, Shropshire, but the government or DEFRA will say, well, we haven't heard from you and we'd be delighted to support you. So I found this eye-opening last night when I discovered it. So I thought I'd just pass it on to everybody. If you're looking for money, crowdfunder.co.uk isn't necessarily about crowdfunding. It is also just helping the government distribute cash to those people who should be getting it but didn't know they could. So I mentioned that. I'll put that in the chat in a moment. And then thank you very much for paying attention to these wonderful questions from me. And now let's move on to the important ones from everyone else. And Stuart, you're first, please.
Hi, thanks. I'd just like to say thank you for two fantastic presentations. One of my interests at the moment is soil health, which I think Lynn was talking about quite a bit. A lot of our soil is managed by farmers. And I was wondering how you got on with regenerative farming with your local farmers.
So there's a lot of interest in regenerative agriculture locally. It's a huge, big plethora, isn't it, of actions.
Yeah.
So as part of the strategy, we've incorporated aspects, I suppose would be fair to say, within the strategy document. There's a section on farmland, and there are priorities and actions as there are in if there would be for grassland and woodland and wetland. So there's a specific section on farmland, and the kind of regenerative aspects have been included within that, and we drew on a couple of case studies to give people an idea of the sorts of things that they could do to bring the kind of strategy to life a little bit. But I suppose it's in the round in that. So I suppose it's not the place to go if you were looking for, loads of information on regenerative agriculture. I wouldn't say the local nature recovery strategy is the gospel, but it's a really fundamental, important point of important part of the LNRS. Because we're, I think 84% of Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin is farmland. And so if people could move more towards regenerative agriculture and certainly kind of reducing inputs, if that could be worked into their businesses, then that could have a fundamental impact for nature.
But the government seems to be doing its best to deter them from doing it.
Yeah, I know. And it's really frustrating because, I feel that we're standing up and saying, do this stuff for nature. And at the moment, farmers are saying, well, there's no money. I'm going to have to intensify because I know that there's a market for sheep because I can take them down to, our local livestock market. And I don't have an answer for that because they need consistency and stability, and, they need their business to be here next year. So it's quite it's a sensitive time. And it's not easy kind of being here promoting it, standing up in front of farmers promoting a strategy which has come out from DEFRA, when they're saying, I want to take some of these actions, but I'm not being supported. The kind of rug was pulled before I got there. So yeah, it is something that needs to be addressed. Otherwise, people are going to go in the opposite direction, and that's a big risk.
Yeah, thanks. Graham, don't sleep.
Oh, so sorry. Yes, I beg your pardon. David, go for it.
Or somebody shot you.
Yes, I know. Andrew's invisible arrow has hit. So, David, please go ahead.
Yes, because this nature recovery strategy is being led by county councils, does that mean you have to identify the best places in the county, which may not necessarily be the best places in the district or a parish?
So I suppose the short answer is yes, in that the strategy prioritizes at the scale at which it's working. But I would hope that there would be some throughput, and that there's some similarity. I get it's a different exercise if you're starting at parish and then working up to district, working up to county. You would end up with a different result. So I guess it depends on the methodology that's being used locally. Here we don't have district councils. We've got Shropshire Council and Telford and Wrekin Council, and then the parish councils. So we've used county-wide data sets, and so we have prioritised at that level. But you would need to ask your local area to get a kind of definite answer for how they've done it in your area.
Yes, I'm asking because I'm in an urban area and developers are allowed to compensate somewhere else in the whole county. And as today, Baroness Willis put an amendment to the Planning and Infrastructure law to say everywhere should be within 15 minutes of nature, because of the decline in nature in urban areas like ours.
Mm-hmm.
And but where we are, they're doing compensation in places you couldn't get to in 15 minutes unless you have a flying car.
Yeah, yeah, and that's yeah. I mean, BNG's definitely it's got its benefits, and it's better than it was previously, which is, you know, the damage happened and there was nothing you could do about it. At least there's some recompense, but it's definitely got its flaws.
Elunid, maybe move on to you, please.
Yes, thank you. It's just two follow-up questions to the things that have been raised already. One was the mapping system, this parish online. How does the parish council sign up to this?
I will put the details in the chat, Elunid.
Thank you very much. And the other question was, we are an urban parish, and we have got about 10% tree canopy cover, which we're trying to increase to 20%. We have a plan. We've had it on hold now for nearly a year, but we're waiting for government funding because the fund for trees was withdrawn, and we're waiting for the new one. Have you got any news about when this might come out, or alternative sources of funding?
No, well, so new, I've got no idea. So I used to work for Natural England, and I, you know, in theory had meetings with DEFRA every day, and still only heard about new funding at the same time as it was announced. So I don't think anyone gets to hear about it unless you're in a very close circle. I don't know. I mean, there would be, I guess there's different benefits. So I suppose I'm just thinking from a benefit point of view, because you've got, you know, there's obviously benefit to people from a nature point of view, benefit to people from a urban cooling point of view, air pollution point of view. Um, and I don't know where those links would come through. The hard thing for street trees is that they're really expensive. I mean, it's something like £2,000 a tree or something, isn't it? It's like it's so expensive, and so the cost if you're putting in a big tree and then, you know, needing it to water and, you know, all of that is tricky. I don't know. Other people might be better placed to answer. I've not looked for funding for street trees for a long
Can
time.
I say a bit on that? So we started Trees Outside Woodlands project in Shropshire, and there are 4 community-based nurseries. So the funding came through the local authority, tiny amounts of funding, and I started one of the nurseries here. So I'm growing 200 oak trees with local provenance from acorns. They're sort of 2 years old now, and we're just giving them away for free. So, I mean, people can, if people wanted to, they could just start to grow their own trees. And it's much better to grow them locally with local provenance. So what I'm doing this year is going round veteran oak trees and collecting acorns from, you know, veteran trees that have got there's been no sort of succession planning. So we want to capture those genetics as well. So somebody put in the chat that the Tree Council have done lots of stuff in terms of lots of talks and information on opening micro nurseries. So as I said, you know, if every town and parish council here opened a micro nursery, just growing 200 trees every year, we could grow 38,000 in the county every year.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a tricky one though, isn't it? Because the trees are, you know, I think, I mean, I don't want to, because I think there are so many important things in terms of local provenance and growing trees and making it easy and getting people engaged. The street trees is hard nut to crack because of all the stuff that goes with it, because it just costs so much because of the contractors to put it into the concrete effectively.
Yeah.
It does make it cheaper doing it small trees if you can get it past the landscape people, because they don't need much watering,
No.
need as much looking after, and there's less failure rate, but they just look a bit pathetic, and potentially more likely to get damaged because they're so little. But yeah, it's a tricky one. I don't know what to suggest with street trees, sorry. And they're really important. Urban cooling's massive.
Yeah.
It's going to get more and more of an issue.
Right, thank you very much.
Claire, maybe move on to you, please.
Yes, my question was about implementation, because the Lynn mentioned that in the LNRS there's no mandate for delivery. So we've had our local one in West Cheshire. I was out for consultation earlier this year, and it's got lots of fantastic ideas in there. But so from what you say, at the moment they're just guidelines. So I was just wondering that we're a parish council and we are currently updating a neighbourhood development plan. We've got the scope to put in some policies under planning that would actually have to be followed. I'm wondering to what extent we can use the LNRS document as evidence and support for our own policies.
Yeah, you can, and the LNRS has got it's got some status in the planning within planning. So it's a material consideration and it has to be given regard. But it's not there to prevent planning. It's more there to inform planning. In that the LNRS isn't mapping necessarily what's there; it's mapping what could be there. So yeah, so what I would put in there would be things like looking at what for your neighbourhood, what the LNRS is saying. If it highlights any particular places which are really good for biodiversity that aren't already protected, then they're important to have that kind of enhanced consideration in the planning within any planning decisions that go on. But also to look at where there's kind of been an opportunity that's been identified and using it's possible to use the planning system as a tool for enhancing nature, in that we need money. So if some things are going to happen anyway, then arguably if you've got a kind of green desert, depending on what's there already, you can enhance nature if it's, we all know this, if it's thought about early enough and with enough care and consideration, then there's definite benefits for nature and for people. It doesn't mean that, there aren't broader impacts and that it then is a kind of land use change forever and it might not be right for other reasons. But if the planning, if whatever government says you've got to have this many houses, then the LNRS, I would hope, would give some guidance as to how they could be planned more sensitively into the surrounds.
Sure, and we can certainly try and do this, but if it's just guidance, I'm wondering how well it's going to hold. Because in what we've seen happen around the Cheshire villages, where land is quite, well, housing is quite profitable, is that unless it's written in black and white in the planning policy documents, then it tends to be disregarded to a large extent, unless you're very lucky and your developer happens to be one of a better kind. But if they're not, then all the nice to haves will just get binned, and they will only do what's actually set in the letter of the planning law.
I know, it's really depressing.
Right. Okay. So basically, it's trying to push back on planning applications and trying to write it into our policies. And
the neighbourhood plans they've got status, haven't they? So you're definitely, there's loads of benefit in doing it and deciding how the development is going to happen in your patch, because then you've got some sort of control over it. But I know it's tricky. We need a different solution because we're not getting more land, are we?
Thank you.
Now, I have a hand still up from Luned. Is that just a leftover, or do you have another question? Right. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Yes, Judith, you're raising your hand.
Yes, hello. I don't know how to find the hand on my computer to raise it. I was just wondering, was there any connection with health and health benefits that might bring in another stream of funding?
Yeah, there are. I mean, there are loads of connections. I mean, there's kind of connections with the kind of physical health. So such as, we're literally losing people every year now because of heat, particularly in urban environments. And so that is a massive thing. But from a kind of health and well-being perspective, I think that opens a whole raft of different funding opportunities. And I know that there are different projects around the country that are building on that. But there's also, Janet and I have been speaking to the NHS from a kind of an estate management perspective as well, as a kind of, a public body that has got land. And, there are benefits, kind of multiple benefits if health organisations can actually enhance the nature around the place where poorly people are, then they get better quicker, and there is more and more evidence to support that.
So the sorts of conversations we've been having is, can you create a mini meadow in front of your GP surgery? Can you, instead of mowing and creating green deserts in care homes, can we have some trees, please, and wildflowers? And those sorts of conversations. So it's not rocket science. It's, and we also started a conversation with Connexus, who are our local biggest social housing provider. Could you integrate nature into your housing stock, and how to do that? So, put up swift boxes, plant trees, litter pick and plant wildflowers on derelict pieces of land that just become a nuisance, so on and so forth. So it's none of it's difficult.
Did you find them responsive, Janet?
So far they are interested. Yeah.
I think a lot of them are keen to become more popular, aren't they?
Well, yeah, it's good. It's a good news story instead of a bad news story. If you can create a mini meadow somewhere which has previously been an eyesore, then that's great.
There are a few in Oxfordshire, where you are, David. There are a few GP surgeries that were part of it called Be Healthy, BEE Healthy scheme that set up kind of really nice pollinator flower beds, effectively, just in front of their GP surgeries, as part of a kind of broader project, because of the benefits. And people, it takes that moment, that breath, which we're not very good at these days, because it's kind of head down and yeah.
So one of the big projects in Shropshire has been restoring the roadside verges to long linear meadows. And we're just on the cusp now of trying to get the contract changed, because the local authority gave out a 10-year contract last time. So the contract's just up for renewal. I think it's just been extended another year. But what we want them to do is move from cut and leave to cut, collect and restore. And in the end, that would save, well, potentially millions of pounds. We've got a huge roadside network here. So, and then, all the benefits that come from that in terms of biodiversity and increasing the insect population.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Stuart, can we move to you, please?
Mute. It is basically another answer for Judith. It was an interesting study which I was looking at a few weeks ago. Somebody divided a group of young children into two. One was allowed to play in a standard sandbox for 3 or 4 weeks. The second group played in the same sandbox, inoculated with soil and all the native soil fungi and bacteria and things. And they found the children that played in the soil enriched sandbox had much better microbiomes and much better immune systems.
Wow. That's wonderful. Yeah.
So go out and eat soil.
Yeah.
There are some very interesting films on soil health, which I put in the chat earlier on. People want, one of the things that we would recommend is that you start showing those films in parish council meetings. Understand soil and how important it is.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely vital.
Yeah.
Well, Lynn and Janet, it's been a wonderfully uplifting session. Thank you so much. I found it very informative, very refreshing, and very encouraging, and lots of leads to follow. So thank you so much, and do come again next year. So now I am able
with some proper results.
Yeah.
Nice, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, some change and delivery.
In a change from my usual carefree manner, I am able to tell you that next week we will be discussing local partnerships, which may well follow on from how you start pulling all these people together to get them to work together and to be able to have larger amounts of money available to do things. So do please tune in again next week, those of you who are interested. And if there aren't any further questions, let me just reiterate a big thank you, and I hope to see you again in the future. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah,
Take care.
thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.